The first gunshot shattered the night like lightning, jolting Katherine O'Malley awake from the shallow sleep she'd managed to find in her small homestead cabin. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she clutched the quilt to her chest, counting the seconds between each terrifying crack that echoed across the Montana plains. This was the third night this week, and she was beginning to fear she'd never know peace again. Katherine slipped from her bed, her bare feet silent against the rough wooden floor, as she made her way to the window. The moon hung full and bright in the October sky of 1879, illuminating the empty stretch of land surrounding her isolated home. She'd inherited the place 6 months ago after her father's passing, and though many had advised the 24-year-old woman to sell and move back east, Katherine had stubbornly refused. This land was all she had left of her family. Another shot rang out, closer this time. Katherine ducked instinctively, though she knew the walls of her cabin would offer little protection against the determined shooter. She'd heard rumors of cattle rustlers in the area, and disputes over water rights had turned violent in neighboring properties. Being a woman alone made her vulnerable, a fact the townspeople of Redemption Creek never tired of reminding her. She reached for her father's old rifle, checking that it was loaded as he'd taught her years ago. Her hands trembled slightly, but her resolve was firm. She would defend her home if necessary, though the thought of actually firing at another human being made her stomach twist with dread. A horse's whinny cut through the night, followed by the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Katherine positioned herself beside the window, rifle raised. The rider came into view, a tall figure on a dark horse, moving with purpose toward her cabin. "Who goes there?" she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm armed and not afraid to shoot." The rider slowed, raising both hands to show he meant no harm. "Samuel Kincaid, madam. I work for the Broken Spur herd Gunfire and came to investigate." Katherine recognized the name of the neighboring ranch, but kept her rifle ready. "Step into the light where I can see you properly, Mr. Kincaid." The man complied, guiding his horse closer to her cabin. The moonlight revealed a face weathered by sun and wind, yet still youthful beneath the shadow of his hat. He couldn't have been more than 30, with broad shoulders and an easy way of sitting his horse that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. "Sorry to disturb you, Miss O'Malley," he said. "Mr. Henderson sent me to patrol the boundaries after we lost some cattle last week. Those shots came from the direction of Rattlesnake Creek. Likely rustlers." Katherine lowered her rifle slightly. "How do you know my name?" Samuel Kincaid smiled, a quick flash of white teeth in the darkness. "Everyone knows old man O'Malley's daughter who came from Boston to claim his land. Caused quite a stir in town, if you don't mind me saying." Another shot echoed in the distance, causing Katherine to flinch. Samuel's expression turned serious as he dismounted in one fluid motion. "You shouldn't be alone out here, Miss O'Malley. These rustlers are getting bolder. May I come in and check that your doors and windows are secure?" Katherine hesitated. Propriety dictated that she shouldn't allow a strange man into her home at night, but fear won out over decorum. She nodded once and stepped back from the door. "I'll tie up my horse first," Samuel said, leading the animal to her small corral. Minutes later, he stood in her cabin, his tall frame making the space seem smaller than it was. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. His eyes, which Katherine now saw were a deep blue, scanned the cabin's interior with professional assessment. "Your door latch is weak," he noted, examining the simple wooden mechanism. "I could fix it for you tomorrow if you'd allow it." "That's kind, but unnecessary," Katherine replied, setting her rifle aside but keeping it within reach. "I can manage my own repairs." Samuel nodded, respect flickering in his eyes. "Of course. Just offering my services, madam." Another shot rang out, closer than before, and Katherine couldn't suppress her startled gasp. Samuel moved to the window, peering out cautiously. "They're moving this way," he said grimly. "Might be best if I stay until they pass by." "If that's agreeable to you." Katherine wanted to refuse, to assert her independence as she had done countless times since arriving in Montana Territory. But the night was filled with danger, and her father had always taught her that there was wisdom in accepting help when needed. Very well, Mr. Kincaid. You may stay until the danger has passed. As the night wore on, more shots disturbed the darkness. Samuel explained they were likely signals between the rustlers, a code to coordinate their theft of cattle from the surrounding ranches. He spoke with knowledge gained from years working the land, having come west from Pennsylvania after the war. My pa fought for the Union, he told her as they sat at her small table, a lamp burning low between them. Didn't come home. Ma remarried, and my stepfather and I didn't see eye to eye. Headed west when I turned 18 and never looked back. Katherine found herself sharing her own story, her father leaving for the West when she was just a child, the occasional letters and money he sent, her mother's death 3 years ago, and finally the lawyer's letter informing her of her inheritance. People in town think I'm a fool for staying, she admitted. Maybe they're right. Samuel shook his head. Takes courage to build something of your own. This land gets in your blood. Once it does, it's hard to leave. A particularly loud gunshot cracked through the night, much closer than before. Katherine jumped, her teacup clattering against its saucer. Samuel was on his feet instantly, extinguishing the lamp. Get down, he whispered urgently, moving to the window. Katherine obeyed, crouching beside her bed as Samuel checked each window in turn. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder, then slowed to a walk near her property. They're at the edge of your land, Samuel whispered, his hand on his holstered revolver. Katherine's breath caught in her throat as voices drifted through the night rough, angry men arguing about direction and property lines. She crawled to where her rifle leaned against the wall, gripping it with trembling hands. Samuel moved silently across the room to crouch beside her. Stay low, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. If they come this way, we'll make for the root cellar. There's only one entrance easier to defend. The minutes stretched like hours as they waited in tense silence. The riders lingered at the edge of her property, their voices occasionally rising in heated discussion. Finally, mercifully, the sound of hoofbeats resumed, fading into the distance. Katherine released a shaky breath. Will they come back? Not tonight, I think, Samuel replied, though he remained vigilant. They seem to be arguing about whether to cross your land. One of them must have recognized it as the O'Malley place. And that stopped them? Samuel's expression was grave in the dim moonlight filtering through the window. Your father had a reputation for being a crack shot and not asking questions before firing at trespassers. They might not know he's passed. Katherine felt a pang of grief mixed with ironic gratitude for her father's fearsome reputation. Small mercies, I suppose? The night grew quieter as the hours passed, but Katherine found sleep impossible. Samuel insisted on keeping watch, positioning himself by the window where he could see any approach to the cabin. His steady presence was oddly comforting in a way Katherine hadn't experienced since arriving in Montana. You should try to rest, Miss O'Malley, he said softly around midnight. I'll wake you if there's trouble. Katherine knew she should refuse, maintain her distance from this man she barely knew. Yet something in his manner, a quiet strength without the condescension she'd grown accustomed to from men in town, made her trust him. Thank you, Mr. Kincaid, she said, settling onto her bed fully clothed, her rifle still within reach. She didn't expect to sleep, but exhaustion eventually claimed her. When she woke, pale dawn light was filtering through the windows. Samuel Kincaid sat in the same position, his vigilance unwavering through the night. All quiet for the past few hours, he reported, standing and stretching his tall frame. I should get back to the Broken Spur before they send out a search party. Katherine nodded, suddenly aware of her rumpled appearance, and the impropriety of having a man in her home overnight, regardless of the circumstances. Of course. Thank you for your protection, Mr. Kincaid. Samuel retrieved his hat, his movements unhurried. Miss O'Malley, I hope you won't think me forward, but I'd like to return today to fix that door latch. For my own peace of mind, if nothing else. Katherine wanted to refuse, to prove she needed no man's help. But the memory of those gunshots was still too vivid, the fear too fresh. "That would be appreciated, Mr. Kincaid." He tipped his hat with a small smile. "Call me Samuel, please. Or Sam. Most folks do. Then you must call me Katherine." As promised, Samuel returned that afternoon with tools and supplies. He worked efficiently on her door, replacing the flimsy latch with a sturdy lock. While he worked, Katherine found herself studying him, the careful precision of his hands, the quiet concentration in his expression, the way the sunlight caught in his dark hair. "Where did you learn carpentry?" she asked, offering him a cup of coffee as he finished. "My grandfather was a cabinet maker," Samuel explained, accepting the drink gratefully. "Taught me the basics before I was tall enough to see over his workbench. Comes in handy on the ranch." Their conversation flowed easily as he reinforced her windows and checked the perimeter of her property. Katherine found herself speaking more freely than she had with anyone since arriving in Montana. Samuel listened attentively, offering observations about the territory and advice about surviving the approaching winter. As the sun began to set, Samuel reluctantly prepared to leave. "I've done what I can for now, but I'd rest easier knowing you weren't alone out here, Katherine." She stiffened slightly. "I've managed these past months on my own." "I don't doubt your capability," he said quickly. "But even the most seasoned ranchers don't face rustlers alone if they can help it." Before Katherine could respond, the distant sound of riders approaching caught their attention. Samuel's hand moved instinctively to his revolver as he stepped onto the porch, positioning himself protectively in front of Katherine. 3 riders appeared, their horses kicking up dust as they approached. Katherine recognized the lead rider as Jacob Henderson, owner of the Broken Spur and Samuel's employer. "There you are, Kincaid," Henderson called, reining in his horse. His gaze shifted to Katherine, his expression cooling. "Miss O'Malley." Katherine nodded stiffly. Henderson had made several offers to buy her land since her arrival, each one more pressuring than the last. "Mr. Henderson, what brings you to my property?" "Tracking rustlers who hit the north pasture last night. Lost 12 head. Henderson's eyes narrowed at Samuel. "Didn't expect to find my foreman playing handyman." Samuel straightened. "Miss O'Malley's security needed improvement, sir. After the gunfire last night, I thought it prudent to offer assistance." Henderson's gaze traveled between them, something calculating in his expression. "Indeed. Well, we need to ride out now. Those cattle won't find themselves." Samuel turned to Katherine. "I'll check on you when I can. Keep your rifle close tonight." "I always do," she replied, aware of Henderson's assessing gaze. As Samuel mounted his horse, he leaned down to speak quietly. "Bar the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone you don't trust completely." Katherine nodded, oddly reluctant to see him go. She watched the men ride away, Samuel's broad shoulders straight and proud despite Henderson's obvious disapproval. That night, the gunfire returned, more distant but still unsettling. Katherine lay awake, her rifle beside her, thinking of Samuel Kincaid's steady presence, and wondering if she would see him again. 3 days passed without any sign of him. Katherine tried to focus on her daily chores, tending her small garden, caring for her 2 milk cows and handful of chickens, and repairing the fence along the western edge of her property. She told herself she wasn't watching the horizon for a familiar silhouette on horseback. On the 4th day, Katherine hitched her wagon and drove into Redemption Creek for supplies. The small town consisted of a single dusty street lined with essential businesses: general store, blacksmith, saloon, hotel, and a small church. She felt the usual stares as she tied her horse outside the general store. Inside, Mrs. Perkins greeted her with the same mixture of curiosity and pity Katherine had grown accustomed to. "Miss O'Malley, we weren't sure we'd see you again after all that trouble with rustlers this week. It takes more than a few nighttime disturbances to drive me away, Mrs. Perkins," Katherine replied, handing over her list of needed supplies. As Mrs. Perkins gathered the items, she lowered her voice. Heard Sam Kincaid came to your rescue the other night. Henderson's been in a foul mood about it ever since. Katherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. Mr. Kincaid merely offered assistance as any good neighbor would. Mrs. Perkins raised an eyebrow, her expression knowing. Sam's a good man. One of the few in these parts who treats a lady with proper respect. Before Katherine could respond, the store's door swung open, and Samuel himself walked in. He stopped short at the sight of her, surprise giving way to a warm smile that made Katherine's heart beat a little faster. Miss O'Malley, he greeted, removing his hat. Good to see you well. Mr. Kincaid, she acknowledged, aware of Mrs. Perkins watching them with undisguised interest. Samuel cleared his throat. I was going to ride out to check on you today. We caught 2 of the rustlers yesterday, found them with Henderson's cattle and 3 of Widow Johnson's horses. That's a relief, Katherine said, genuinely glad to hear it. No more gunfire in the night, I hope. Should be quieter now, Samuel agreed. His blue eyes studied her face, and he seemed about to say more when the door opened again. Jacob Henderson entered, his gaze immediately landing on Samuel and Katherine standing together. His mouth thinned to a hard line. Kincaid, I thought you were picking up supplies for the bunkhouse. Yes, sir. Just getting to it, Samuel replied, his posture stiffening slightly. Henderson turned to Katherine, his smile not reaching his eyes. Miss O'Malley, I hope you're reconsidering my offer for your land. After these troubles, surely you see it's no place for a woman alone. Katherine straightened her spine. My answer remains the same, Mr. Henderson. The land is not for sale. Henderson's smile vanished. Stubbornness won't protect you out there. Next time, Kincaid might not ride to your rescue. The threat in his words was barely veiled. Samuel stepped forward, his voice low but firm. Miss O'Malley has friends in this territory, sir. She's not as alone as you might think. A tense silence followed before Henderson turned on his heel. Get those supplies and be back at the ranch within the hour, Kincaid. We've got work to do. He strode out, the door banging behind him. Mrs. Perkins exhaled dramatically. That man gets more sour by the day. Ever since your father refused to sell to him, Miss O'Malley, he's had his eye on that water access your property provides. Katherine frowned. My father refused to sell to Henderson? He never mentioned that in his letters. Oh yes. Mrs. Perkins nodded emphatically. Quite a row they had about it in this very store. Must be 3 years ago now. Your father said that land would go to his daughter, and no one else. Samuel was watching Katherine closely. Henderson doesn't take rejection well. Be careful around him. Katherine nodded, a new understanding dawning about Henderson's persistent interest in her property. I should get back. There's a storm brewing, and I need to secure the chicken coop. Samuel glanced outside at the gathering clouds. I'll escort you home. That's not necessary, it wasn't a question. He interrupted gently. Let me help you load your supplies at least. Mrs. Perkins beamed approvingly as Samuel carried Katherine's purchases to her wagon. Outside, he secured the items and then spoke in a low voice. Henderson fired me this morning. Katherine's eyes widened. Because you helped me? Samuel nodded, his expression grim. Said I was forgetting who pays my wages. I've got a week to clear out of the bunkhouse. That's terrible, Katherine said, genuinely distressed. Where will you go? There's work to be had. McGregor's place might be hiring, or I could head up to Helena. He hesitated. But I wanted to make sure you'd be all right before I move on. The thought of Samuel leaving created an unexpected hollowness in Katherine's chest. I've imposed on your kindness enough, Mr. Kincaid. You shouldn't lose your livelihood on my account. Sam, he reminded her softly. And I've been considering a change for some time. Henderson's not an easy man to work for. He glanced at the darkening sky. That storm's coming faster than I thought. We should get moving. They rode separately, Samuel on his horse beside Katherine's wagon. The wind picked up as they left town, driving dust and the first spatters of rain before it. By the time they reached Catherine's homestead, the storm had arrived in full force, rain pouring down in sheets that made it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. They rushed to unhitch the horse and secure the wagon, then made a dash for the cabin porch. Katherine was soaked through by the time they reached shelter, her hair plastered to her face and neck. "You should change into dry clothes," Samuel said, water dripping from his hat and coat. "I'll wait on the porch until the worst passes." Katherine shook her head. "Don't be ridiculous. You'll catch your death out here." She pushed open the door. "Come in and dry off by the fire." Inside, Katherine stoked the banked coals in her small stove while Samuel removed his dripping coat and hat. The storm's fury increased, wind howling around the cabin's corners and rain hammering against the roof. "Looks like I might be imposing on your hospitality longer than intended," Samuel observed, glancing at the windows now streaming with water. "That creek between here and town will be flooded within the hour." Katherine felt a flutter of nerves, not at the prospect of being stranded with Samuel, but at how little the idea troubled her. "There's plenty of food, at least. And I appreciate the company during such weather." While Katherine changed behind a screen in the corner, Samuel built up the fire and set a pot of coffee to boil. They shared a simple meal of beans, biscuits, and dried apple slices, the storm creating a strangely intimate atmosphere as they sat at her small table. "What will you do now?" Katherine asked as they finished eating. "After leaving the Broken Spur?" Samuel considered the question, his expression thoughtful. "I've been saving to buy my own place someday. Not enough yet for anything substantial, but I might look for a small parcel to start with." "Around here?" Katherine tried to keep her tone casual. "I've grown fond of this valley," he admitted, his eyes meeting hers. "Found reasons to stay that I didn't expect." The implication in his words hung between them, either acknowledging it directly. As night fell, the storm showed no signs of abating. Lightning flashed, followed by thunder that shook the small cabin. "I'll sleep on the floor by the stove," Samuel said firmly when Katherine offered him her bed. "I've bedded down in far worse places." Katherine provided him with blankets and a pillow, acutely aware of his presence as she prepared for sleep. The impropriety of their situation wasn't lost on her, but in the isolated wilderness, conventional rules often gave way to practicality. She had just settled into bed when a particularly violent thunderclap shook the cabin, followed by the unmistakable sound of a tree crashing down nearby. Katherine sat up with a gasp. "It's all right," Samuel said, already on his feet. "Hit somewhere behind the cabin, from the sound of it." Another flash of lightning illuminated the room, and in that brief moment, Katherine saw Samuel clearly, tall and steady, a point of calm in the storm's chaos. Something shifted in her heart, a recognition of feelings she had been trying to ignore since their first meeting. "Samuel," she said softly, surprising herself. "I'm glad you're here." He turned toward her, his face in shadow but his voice warm. "So am I, Katherine." Morning brought clear skies in the aftermath of the storm's fury. A large pine had fallen behind the cabin, narrowly missing the structure but crushing part of the chicken coop. Katherine and Samuel worked together to free the frightened hens and repair the damage as best they could. "The creek's still high," Samuel observed as they finished. "Might not be passable until tomorrow." Katherine nodded, finding she didn't mind the extension of his stay. They spent the day working side by side, Samuel splitting wood while Katherine tended her garden and preserved vegetables for the coming winter. The easy rhythm of their shared labor felt natural, as if they had been partners for years rather than mere acquaintances. As evening approached, Samuel seemed to reach a decision. "Katherine, there's something I need to say." She looked up from the stew she was stirring, her heart quickening at his serious tone. "I believe Henderson might have had something to do with those rustlers," he said. "The timing of their appearance near your property, his increased pressure for you to sell, it's too convenient." Katherine frowned. "You think he arranged it to frighten me into selling?" "I can't prove it," Samuel admitted. But I overheard something the night before I was fired. Henderson talking with his brother-in-law about making sure you understood the dangers of living alone out here." Katherine absorbed this information, anger replacing surprise. "That explains why the rustlers stopped at my property line that night. They weren't afraid of my father's reputation, they were following orders." "I should have told you sooner," Samuel said, regret in his voice. "But I needed to be certain before making such an accusation." "What should we do?" Katherine asked, her mind racing. Samuel's expression was determined. "First, you need to know that whatever happens, I won't let Henderson or anyone else drive you from your land." The conviction in his voice stirred something deep within Katherine. "Thank you, but this isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment I found you standing against those gunshots alone," he replied, moving closer. "Katherine, A sound outside interrupted him, horses approaching. Samuel moved to the window, tension evident in his posture. "Henderson. And he's not alone." Katherine joined him at the window, her heart sinking at the sight of Henderson and 3 riders approaching her cabin. "What does he want now?" "Nothing good," Samuel replied grimly, checking his revolver. "Stay inside." "No," Katherine said firmly, retrieving her rifle. "This is my property. We face him together." Samuel studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Together, then." They stepped onto the porch as Henderson and his men reached the cabin. The rancher's face darkened at the sight of Samuel standing beside Katherine. "Still here, Kincaid?" Henderson called, his tone deceptively light. "Making yourself at home, I see. What do you want, Henderson?" Samuel asked directly. Henderson dismounted, his boots hitting the dirt with deliberate force. "Just checking on Miss O'Malley after that storm. Being neighborly." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Though I'm surprised to find my former employee has taken up residence." "The storm flooded the creek," Katherine explained coldly. "Mr. Kincaid has been helping repair damage to my property." "How fortunate for you," Henderson replied. His gaze swept over the homestead. "It's a shame about all this trouble you've been having, Miss O'Malley. Rustlers, storms. Living alone out here is proving difficult, isn't it?" The implied threat was clear. Katherine tightened her grip on her rifle. "I manage quite well, Mr. Henderson. And I'm not alone, I have friends who look out for me." Henderson's smile vanished. "Friends like Kincaid? A man with no property, no position? What protection can he offer?" "More than you might think," Samuel replied, his voice steady. "Especially now that Sheriff Davis is investigating those rustlers you hired to frighten Miss O'Malley." Henderson's face flushed with anger. "That's a dangerous accusation, Kincaid." "Is it?" Samuel took a step forward. "One of the men you caught confessed this morning. Told the sheriff exactly who paid him to fire shots near the O'Malley property at night." Katherine glanced at Samuel, realizing he was bluffing. They had been together since yesterday, with no news from town. But the effect on Henderson was immediate. The rancher's composure cracked, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "You're lying," Henderson said, but doubt had crept into his voice. "The sheriff's probably on his way here now," Samuel continued calmly. "Wanted to question Miss O'Malley about the harassment she's experienced." Henderson looked to his men, then back at Samuel and Katherine. The standoff stretched for several tense seconds before he made his decision. "We're leaving," he snapped to his companions. "This isn't over, Kincaid. Not by a long shot." They watched as Henderson and his men rode away, dust rising behind their horses as they galloped toward the broken spur. "He'll be back," Katherine said quietly when they were alone again. Samuel nodded. "But not today. And with any luck, that rustler they caught really will talk. Henderson's not as well liked as he thinks. People might be willing to stand against him if given the chance." They returned inside, the confrontation leaving them both on edge. As night fell, Katherine found herself unable to settle, moving restlessly around the cabin while Samuel watched from his seat by the fire. "I won't let him drive me away," she said suddenly, stopping her pacing. This land was my father's dream. Now it's mine. Samuel stood, crossing to where she stood. Katherine, he said softly. I need to tell you something, and it can't wait any longer. She looked up at him, struck by the intensity in his blue eyes. I'm not leaving, he said simply. Not this valley, and not you unless you asked me to go. Katherine's breath caught. Samuel, let me finish, he said gently. I know we've known each other only a short time, but I've never felt this way about anyone before. When I heard those gunshots that night and found you standing brave but afraid, something changed for me. He took her hands in his touch warm and steady. I don't have much to offer right now, but I'm a hard worker, and I know ranching. If you'd allow it, I'd like to help you build something here together. Katherine felt tears prick her eyes, unexpected emotion welling up. Are you proposing a business arrangement, Mr. Kincaid? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A smile tugged at his lips. I'm proposing whatever you'll accept, Miss O'Malley. Business, friendship. He paused, his gaze holding hers. Or something more. Katherine had come west seeking independence, determined to prove she needed no one. Yet in this moment, she recognized that true strength sometimes meant having the courage to let someone in. I think, she said carefully, that I would like to explore something more, Samuel Kincaid. The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle kiss that held both promise and question. When they parted, Katherine felt as though something long restless within her had finally found its place. What happens now? She asked. First, Samuel said, we visit Sheriff Davis tomorrow and make sure Henderson faces consequences for his actions. Then, he squeezed her hands. We build something here. Together. It won't be easy, Katherine warned. The winters are harsh, and the work never ends. Nothing worthwhile ever comes easy, Samuel replied. But facing it together makes it bearable. As darkness settled over the cabin, they sat side by side before the fire, making plans and sharing dreams. For the first time since arriving in Montana, Katherine felt truly at home. The night passed without gunfire, without fear, with only the comfort of Samuel's presence beside her. When dawn came, Katherine woke to find Samuel already up, preparing coffee and watching the sunrise from her porch. She joined him, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. No regrets in the morning light? He asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. Katherine shook her head, smiling up at him. Not one. The future stretched before them, uncertain in its details but clear in its direction. Together they would face Henderson, the harsh elements, and whatever else the frontier might throw at them. And when gunfire disturbed the night again, as it inevitably would in this wild territory, Katherine knew she would no longer face it alone. Samuel's arms slipped around her waist as they watched the sun climb higher, painting the valley in gold. Welcome home, Katherine, he said softly. She leaned into his embrace, her heart full. Welcome home, Samuel.